So, you're going to take the operator certification exam. Maybe you've never taken the wastewater ops cert test before, or perhaps you have and you didn't pass. Either way, don't panic. The operator tests cover knowledge you use or could use on the job. And that's good news because that means your on the job experience will help you on exam day. But remember that not all processes covered on your exam may be in use at your particular wastewater facility. You may have a lagoon system, but for the test at least, you'll need to know how a conventional treatment system works. So leverage your practical experience, but be prepared to study hard for the exam to become familiar with topics outside of your daily use. You might ask yourself, why should I study? There are several reasons, but an important one is to find out where your knowledge gaps are. It has also been shown that people with better study methods and strategies tend to score higher on exams. If you look at the certification exam before and the outcome wasn't what you'd like, then you probably need to change how you study. Let's think about the operator certification exam in terms of an important upcoming basketball game. In the same way an athlete practices dribbling and shooting to develop their on court skills, you study manuals, sample problems, old tests to develop your wastewater skills, both for passing the certification exam and getting better at your profession. And just like a ball player practices in different ways under different conditions and works hard at what they aren't good at to be better in the game, you too can study using different methods to nail down the knowledge and skills you need to master. You can think of taking timed sample tests like team scrimmage or pickup games. It's game conditions, an opportunity to show the skills you've developed, but without the big consequences. It shows you what you're good at and what still needs work. If you keep getting stripped in the lane during practice, you need to work on ball handling. Similarly, if you constantly miss questions in a given topic, that should be an area for future focus. Test areas you have trouble with may point to gaps in your practical knowledge. Use that information to round out your skill set. Areas you don't do well on in practice tests might just be areas that you don't have much practical experience with, or they may indicate areas you simply need to focus more on. Identifying your weak spots gives you a direction to follow when developing your study plan, test plan, and career. Over time, you can turn those weaknesses into strengths. And taking my metaphor to its logical conclusion, sitting down for the operator certification test is like suiting up for the big game. You wouldn't expect to win the big game without ever practicing, at least not realistically. The same goes for your operator certification test. And remember, if the outcome isn't what you liked, you can always evaluate your performance, knuckle down, and change how you study, and try again. Let's talk about some basic study tips that will help you get through the operator certification exam. It's all about setting up a good practice schedule. Make a study plan. How are you going to get from today to passing the test? Do a self-assessment and build your study plan around that, but expect it to change over time. When you can consistently make a hook shot, you don't have to focus on it quite as hard. You still have to practice that shot, but not at the same level as something that you weren't as good at. Set aside a reasonable amount of time so that you aren't trying to cram everything in last minute. Even the lowest level exam covers a lot of material. You don't want to be trying to learn it all the night before the test That rarely works out well. Start studying early, well before the exam date. This is really just another way of saying manage your time. You may need several months. Think about where you are and where you need to be on test day and reevaluate periodically. Look at your progress and see whether you're on track to pass the test when you've planned to take it. If not, consider either changing your study program or the test date. Nail down the fundamentals. Remember, you don't need a perfect game, you just have to pass. Build on your practical knowledge. Many questions will deal with issues you deal with routinely on the job. Leverage your study and practical work and the knowledge of your coworkers. As you learn new things on the job, ask questions. When you are with coworkers, explain processes to each other. If you can explain something clearly, you understand it. Read available training materials, study guides, and handouts. Most state operator certification websites have lists of available study materials and links to training courses. Some have entire study guides and need to know lists that focus directly on state exam requirements. Typical study aids also include formula sheets that list all of the formulas and equivalents you're likely to run into on test day and through the course of your workday. You can use these formula sheets to identify what types of questions the exam might ask. For example, if you're asked to find the volume, what formulas are involved and what type of information do you need to find a volume? Understanding these units of measurements associated with the formulas are vital to a complete understanding. You can also find out from your state certification agency which exam they use. Some states have their own testing facilities and exams. Others use standardized tests from organizations like the Water Professionals International. If your jurisdiction uses WPI exams, the WPI website has information on exactly what's covered on each certification level. There are also great study guides available. The book shown here is available from Sacramento State University for about $90, and there's also a volume 2 in a series focused on wastewater treatment plant management. It's a great resource for your career, but if you don't want one just yet, just check around. It's possible your utility or a coworker has a copy of this guide or something similar, or it may be available at a local lending library. Use the need to know guides and other study materials as a way of keeping track of what you're comfortable with and what you aren't, taking notes on your materials and keeping track of your progress. No matter what you do, identify and work harder on the weak spots. Thinking about our basketball example, it's great if you can always hit a free throw, but that's not the only shot you're going to have to make in the game. So let's talk about some other study and test preparation techniques. As you review study materials and how statements in the text could be made into questions, there's a lot of information in this one paragraph, but each of these statements could be made into a test question. For example, the highlighted statement, when sized properly, a sewer line should flow 1/2 full during average daily flows. Question, how should a sewer line flow if it is sized properly? Answer, half full during daily flows. In this one paragraph about pipe size, there are at least 3 questions that can be asked. Questions like these can be put on index cards to make flashcards. Flashcards can be your best friend for memorizing material through repetition. They're a great way to test yourself or have someone test you. Your partner doesn't even have to know the topic to ask you questions about it. They just have to read the card. If you do use flashcards, mix up the order every time. Set aside the cards you get right consistently. Don't stop reviewing them, but focus more on the cards you're having trouble with. Also, don't throw them away when you pass the test. You might want to get a higher level certification later on, and those tests are cumulative, meaning you're still responsible for knowing the lower level knowledge. You can also loan flashcards to your buddies or new coworkers to make the process easier for the staff coming behind you. Your coworkers might even have a card set you can borrow. As you're working out the problems during study time and during the exam, sketches can help, particularly if you're a visual learner. Sometimes a simple drawing and the related formula can really help you see what you're after. Test yourself or have someone test you under realistic time conditions. Passing the certification test is not just about being able to answer the questions correctly. You have to be able to answer them correctly under pressure and in the time allowed. Taking timed sample tests will really show you whether you know the material and can work at the pace required to pass the certification exam. There are some things that you should memorize for both test and work life. For example, if you remember that there are 7.481 gallons in a cubic foot of water, that's one less thing you have to look up during the exam or at work. What you don't want to memorize is that there's a volume question on a sample test and the answer was 1 million gallons. In other words, you don't want to memorize the individual math problems, but memorize the process for getting that answer. Partner study can be very helpful if you keep to the study and not distracting each other because it helps with accountability. Typically, people are less likely to make an excuse not to study if someone is depending on them to be there. Studying with a partner also gives you someone to bounce questions off of and run flashcards with. And believe it or not, you'll be learning alongside your partner, even if they're the ones answering the flashcard questions, because you're reviewing the materials at the same time. Let's shift gears a little and talk about that test day. In many states, certification tests are given on a computer, and if it's your first time taking an exam on a computer, that format can be intimidating. Check with your licensing agency to see how they administer their exam, and try to practice exams or study courses that use a similar interface. Part of your strategy might also be to schedule a real exam with your agency as a practice test for yourself in order to familiarize yourself with the process and the interface, kind of like a preseason tune-up game. But if you can schedule a practice test and you've been studying, you might just pass because there's less pressure on you. But remember, there are often restrictions on how soon you can retest. The application process takes time and the tests are not free. Also, get familiar with the test tools that you'll be able to bring or that will be provided for you during the exam. Whether that's a calculator or official formula sheet, you don't want test day to be the first time you've seen it. Wear a watch or keep an eye on the test timer. You'll typically have 100 questions and 3 to 4 hours to get at least 70 right. Pace yourself accordingly. And don't get hung up on one question you can't answer. It's okay to circle through the exam and skipping over the questions that you don't know off the top of your head and answering the easy ones first. Remember, you don't have to answer every question right. You just have to pass. Don't kill a bunch of time on a question you don't know how to answer. If you get stuck on a question, eliminate any obvious wrong choices you can identify and then move on. Once you're done with the questions, you can answer quickly. Go back to the questions you weren't sure about or that you had difficulty with. Even if you can't narrow your choices any further after additional review, eliminating obviously wrong answers increases the probability that you'll pick the right answer from the options that are left. For example, with a question like this, if you don't know the answer, you could use common sense to eliminate a few options. This question is about leaking chlorine gas. What do you know about chlorine? It's a disinfectant, but it's poisonous even in low doses. Now let's apply some knowledge and common sense to get these answers. For answer A, what causes loud noises? Explosions. So that answer would be suggesting that you do something that would cause an explosion, possibly in a confined space. Doesn't make any sense. Cross that option off. Literally cross it out because you may end up coming back to it and you don't want to do the same work twice. Answer B implies you can smell your test result. Do you want to be smelling chlorine? Would you ever put yourself in a position to smell chlorine gas? No. Again, because it's poisonous. Your work experience might tell you that you would be wearing PPE while doing such a test. So there's no way you could smell anything. Cross that one off as well. So that leaves you with two options, red and white smoke. Those are both visual. There's no implication that you have to smell or hear the correct answer, so it's probably one of these. Even if you can't remember which is the correct answer and you have to guess, you've changed your odds to a 50-50 chance you're going to get it right. For the record, the correct answer is white smoke. As you're taking the test, don't bite the premise of any question. In other words, don't try to outthink the test. Read carefully and answer the questions they asked, not what you think it should be. So, to review, make a study plan and stick to it. Manage your time while studying and during the exam. Read available training materials. And take good notes. Draw sketches if they help you. Test yourself or have someone test you. Focus on your weak points and memorize what you have to. Study with a partner if it helps. Start studying well before the exam. Manage your time during the exam and eliminate wrong answers on questions you're not sure about. If you come at the certification test with a well-executed study plan, you are much more likely to succeed than if you don't. Thank you for listening today, and good luck on your exam.